Some disappearances feel like tragedy, but others feel like intention. A hiker lost in an ordinary forest leaves behind tracks, panic, and probability. A victim of misadventure follows a chain of cause and effect: dehydration, exposure, disorientation. Something explainable, even when the body is never found. But when a person vanishes at a place long regarded as sacred, at a monolith, a pilgrimage shrine, a mountaintop temple, the absence feels different. It doesn't feel random, it feels chosen, as if the land itself reached out and erased them. There is a silence to these places, not the silence of isolation, but the silence of presence. The feeling that something is listening back. The sensation that a threshold exists, not just a landscape. Cultures across the world, long before science and borders, spoke of certain places where reality was thinner, where prayer was not directed upward but through. And in these places, people don't merely go missing. They cross out of human narrative. No torn clothing, no struggle, no trace of animal attack, no final scream, only a clean subtraction. It's as if the earth is keeping something, or taking something satan for itself, not in violence but in selection. What if sacred ground was never about worship, but about proximity to something else? Something ancient, something aware, something that still decides in rare and silent moments who remains and who is allowed to step through. Long before temples, before scriptures, before organized religion, the land itself was holy. The earliest civilizations did not assign meaning to sacred places. They recognized it. They didn't choose a mountaintop because it was beautiful. They climbed it because something was already there. Indigenous traditions from every continent share the same uncanny assumption. Some places are alive, not symbolically, literally. Certain stones were keepers. Certain mountains were guardians. Certain streams were passageways. In these belief systems, a shrine is not a monument to the divine, but a marker placed beside it, a signpost acknowledging a boundary. The Celts called them thin places. The Navajo call them crossing grounds. In the Himalayas, they are known as mandala portals. Different languages, same implication. These are not destinations. They are thresholds. This raises the first unsettling suspicion. One ancient cultures never questioned, but modern people refuse to entertain. The structure was never the secret. The location was. Stone walls, carved pillars, sanctuaries, all secondary. All camouflage for something older than architecture, a doorway. So the question is no longer, why did ancient people worship here? The deeper question is, were they speaking to something subtle or sealing something in place? Across history, scattered through archives, folklore, and eyewitness testimony, are stories of people who vanished at sacred ground, not lost to violence, not swept away by nature, but cleanly erased from the human record. They appear in temple logs, in monastic chronicles, in colonial journals, in modern police reports. The locations are centuries apart. The cultures share nothing. Yet the disappearance behaves the same. One moment present, the next gone. Never recovered, never explained, never resolved. And yet these accounts are never studied together. Historians file them as superstition. Anthropologists label them ritual metaphor. Law enforcement treats them as missing persons with no leads. Each domain protects its bubble, because acknowledging the pattern means admitting something uncomfortably large. That these disappearances are not random events but geographic phenomena. Sacred vanishings are dismissed individually because pattern means purpose, and purpose means mechanism. A mechanism implies design, and design points to knowledge older than civilization. This is why the subject remains scattered, unspoken, quarantined from mainstream study. Because once all of these disappearances are placed side by side, a truth emerges that is impossible to ignore. To understand who vanished, we must first understand where they vanished and what the ancients already knew about the land itself. Long before written language, before dynasties or priesthoods, there was already a map, not drawn on parchment but etched into the earth itself. The oldest sacred sites on the planet are not randomly scattered. They align with each other across impossible distances, forming straight lines, geometric lattices, and astral correspondences no primitive culture should have been capable of measuring. Stonehenge aligns with the Ring of Brodgar in Scotland. The Great Pyramids align with Giza's geological fault currents. Machu Picchu sits on an electromagnetic hotspot. Karnak aligns with Nabta Playa, a site older than Egypt. This is not artistic instinct. This is placement intelligence. Modern researchers quietly admit a pattern. Where myths speak of gods, the ground beneath often holds magnetic or seismic irregularities. Energy bends. The ancients didn't build beauty into the landscape. They built architecture around an existing phenomenon. Location came first. Meaning came second. The temple was never the origin. It was the signal marker, a warning beacon, a ritual interface. A civilization didn't make a place sacred. The place made the civilization gather. We keep asking how these sites were built. The real question is, why were these exact coordinates chosen? Göbekli Tepe is older than metalwork, older than cities, older even than agriculture. Yet it was engineered with cosmic precision. It rises from the Anatolian plateau not as a settlement but as a ritual machine, a place humans visited, but never lived. No homes, no storage, no burials. A temple with worshippers who never stayed. Archaeologists call this mysterious, but indigenous memory would call it expected. The site predates writing, yet its stones tell a story of departure. Circular enclosures arranged like gateways, central pillars representing beings, not idols but intercessors. Carvings of animals crossing thresholds, symbolism not of prayer but of transition. Proto-shamanic rites referenced in later Anatolian myth hint at spirit walkers who journeyed out of the body, except some never returned. Their disappearance wasn't lamented, it was acknowledged. The earliest notion of being taken by the sky may not have been metaphorical at all. Even the archaeology whispers absence. Thousands of years of use, yet no graves, no funerary remains, no record of the dead. Because perhaps the initiates were not buried. They simply ceased to be present in this world. Before religion promised heaven, before temples promised salvation, Göbekli Tepe may have been the first documented exit. From Anatolia, the architecture of the sacred circle travels forward through time, resurfacing in Brittany, and the Isles, in formations eerily familiar. Rings of standing stone, always oriented to the sky, always built on geomagnetic seams. Archaeologists call them gathering spaces, but ancient lore describes them very differently. To the Celtic Druids, these were not meeting halls, they were crossing grounds. Brittonic stories speak plainly of people stepping through mist at the stones and never returning. Not metaphor, not vision, disappearance. Folk tradition never claims they died, only that they left this world. The circle was boundary, not amphitheater, a containment line, a tuning device, a controlled perimeter around something that was already there. The stones were not built outward for people to approach. They were set inward, encasing a doorway. Different continents, different eras, the same geometry, the same function implied by the myth, the same outcome whispered in the old world's cautionary tales. If the earliest stone monuments were not altars, but apertures, then what exactly were they opening? Stonehenge is usually presented as a calendar, a monument of astronomy, ritual, or seasonal ceremony. But in the oldest surviving fragments of Druidic oral lore, the inner ring was never described as a place of gathering. It was described as a place of crossing. The stones were not simply marking the sky, they were guarding a threshold beneath it. Druidic initiates were taught that certain individuals were called by the stones. The Tithweir, the Taken Ones. These were not sacrifices, not criminals, not accidents. They were people believed to be selected by forces beyond the human world. Chosen, claimed. In Celtic myth, this is remembered as entering the otherworld. Modern scholars soften it into poetry, but the early accounts never spoke metaphor. They spoke event. A person walked into the ring and was simply gone. No body, no relic, no false grave. This is why secrecy surrounded Stonehenge, not to conceal mystical knowledge, but to protect the uninitiated from stepping too close to something ancient, active, and not entirely predictable. A doorway disguised as a monument. Long before tourists arrived to photograph its silhouette against the solstice sun, Stonehenge functioned as it was feared, a place where the boundary thins and sometimes opens. Long before Stonehenge became an archaeological curiosity, it was already known as a place where people could pass out of the world. The earliest written accounts come not from folklore but from monastic chroniclers, men trained to document events soberly, not poetically. A 12th century cleric describes a group of travelers sheltering near the stones at dusk. One man walked between the pillars after hearing what he believed was a voice. Witnesses reported a pale radiance and then nothing. No cry, no fall. He was there, and then he was not. His companions searched until daylight. No footprints beyond the inner ring, no sign of departure, only subtraction. Another chronicle from the 8th century references a shepherd seen melting into air like breath at morning. The language is not symbolic, it is logistical. A disappearance observed firsthand. Crucially, there are no accounts of bodies being found later. No return stories, no reappearances, no remains washing up weeks later. Not death, not weather, not animal predation, just absence. These were not treated as tragedies. They were treated as confirmations that the stones still took whom they would. And in every record, the same eerie constant appears. Not missing, not dead, removed. If these vanishings belonged only to the distant past, they might be dismissed as mythology. But in August of 1970, Stonehenge produced its most disturbing modern parallel, witnessed not by monks or legends but by uniformed police. A small group of young travelers set up camp just inside the stone ring, planning to spend the night playing music beneath the storm clouds gathering overhead. A patrol car stopped nearby after midnight, ordered them to clear the site for safety. Before officers could approach, a blinding column of blue-white light erupted downward from the clouds, striking the inner circle with surgical precision. Both officers later reported hearing a single sharp scream, cut off mid-breath, followed by total silence. When the light dissipated, the camp remained. The instruments remained, the tent remained. But every human being was gone. No bodies, no drag marks, no shadows of fleeing. Their belongings were untouched, as if the occupants had simply evaporated. The only thing missing was the people. The investigation was quietly closed with no official cause. The story slipped into fringe media, then local rumor. But the implication remains. Whatever force once claimed individuals at Stonehenge never stopped. In the Andean world, a mountain is not scenery, it is a presence. The Quechua do not say a mountain stands, they say it watches. The Apu is not simply rock and snow, but a guardian spirit, a keeper of boundaries between worlds. To walk toward a summit is not just to gain altitude, it is to approach authority. Elevation itself is sacred here. The higher one ascends, the closer the human body moves toward what the old cosmologies considered the realm of the sky beings, not metaphorical gods above, but literal beings of another plane. Thin air was not merely climate, it was threshold. This belief did not come from theology but from observation, from centuries of witnessing what modern culture would call vanishings. Travelers who never reached the next ridge, priests who climbed for pilgrimage and never returned. No bones, no accident site, no burial cairn, just absence. The same signature seen at Stonehenge, Göbekli Tepe, and countless stone circles. To people of the Andes, disappearing on the mountain is not misfortune. It is acceptance. A spirit taken is a spirit acknowledged. Pilgrimage is not completed by arrival at a shrine, but by reaching the place where the veil thins. Here, the promise was never that gods would hear you. The promise was that they might notice you. Machu Picchu is known to the world as a marvel of ancient engineering, but to the Quechua who keep its memory alive, it is not merely a city, it is an interface. Visitors see terraces and walls. The old world sees a gate. And for as long as the site has been watched, people have vanished there without trace. Not fallen, not taken by wildlife, not lost to the jungle. Vanished. Trekkers on the Inca Trail have been found mid-route only in footprints. The trail ends in perfect clarity and then simply stops. No disturbance in the brush, no slide marks, no broken rock. Just disappearance, as if the walker stepped through the air itself. Search teams bring dogs. The dogs refuse to track forward, not because they lose the scent, but because the scent ends. As if the person ceased to exist beyond that final footprint. Local stewards do not treat these as mysteries. They say the mountain calls people back, reclaiming those who approach in the wrong state, unbalanced, unready, uninvited. Where Western culture assumes terrain is passive, indigenous memory holds that the land has discernment, and occasionally intention. The sacred is not symbolic here. It is selective. South of Machu Picchu, carved into an isolated sandstone ridge overlooking Lake Titicaca, lies one of the strangest sacred structures in the world, a doorway that leads nowhere. A flawless recessed portal as smooth as polished glass chiseled into living rock. No chamber beyond it, no interior passage, just a sealed threshold. The Aymara say it was once opened, not physically but cosmically. Their legends speak of priests carrying golden keys who walked through the stone and never returned. This was not described as death. It was described as entering the world behind this one. In 1996, a mountaineer claimed to witness a man standing before the rock face during an unexplained burst of light. When the glare dissolved, the figure was gone. The rock was unbroken. Search efforts found nothing. It is the same riddle resurfacing across epochs. Not taken, not lost, passed through. This site demonstrates escalation. Disappearance here is not metaphor woven into folklore. It is architecture carved for the act itself. And unlike Machu Picchu, which veils its threshold behind altitude and terrain, Hayu Marca presents it openly, a doorway awaiting moment, not merely pilgrim. Next, the pattern widens. The landforms are not isolated, they are connected. When ancient sacred sites are plotted on a globe, a strange geometry emerges, alignments that should not exist by accident. Stonehenge, Giza, Delphi, Machu Picchu, Easter Island, Angkor, all fall along vast linear corridors that span oceans and continents. These are not cultural coincidences, they are a scaffold. Some researchers call them ley lines, others refer to the world energy grid. Indigenous traditions never needed the terminology. They simply taught that certain paths in the earth carry power, like rivers of spirit flowing beneath stone and soil. Either a forgotten global civilization mapped these lines with impossible precision, or the ancients didn't create the network, they followed it. In this view, temples and monoliths were not random achievements of architecture, but markers placed at energetic intersections. Signposts built atop convergence points like pins on an ancient cosmic map. This reframes disappearance entirely. The site may not be the event. The grid may be. People vanish not at the temple, but through the underlying network the temple anchors. Sacred ground becomes a doorway, because the temple is only the doorway's frame. When disappearance reports are plotted the same way, mapped, not narrated, a disturbing clarity appears. People vanish most often not at the visible monument, but precisely where energetic lines intersect. The node is the engine. The temple is only the clock face. Shamans across cultures speak of walking the crossing point, finding the axis where the world grows thin. They do not describe prayer. They describe orientation, the tuning of self to a frequency gateway. In some traditions, initiates were ritually prepared before approaching a node because a person out of balance might be taken unintentionally. Not chosen, but swept across the threshold by resonance alone. This matches modern cases. Hikers vanish not at platform edges or cliffs, but mid-trail, mid-step, mid-breath, as if reality simply let go of its hold on them. The phenomenon behaves like a tuning fork. When the human frequency matches the land frequency, a gate opens. This is no longer the language of abduction. It is the language of transition. Not imposed, activated. Not taken, admitted. This leads to the most unsettling question yet. Were ancient civilizations using these gates, or guarding them? If their architecture was deliberate placement at convergence points, was it an invitation or a barricade? Were they aligning themselves with the portal, or walling it off from the unprepared? This is where the historical narrative fractures. Some cultures describe chosen individuals passing through with honor, a rite of ascension. Others issue warnings: do not cross, do not approach, do not look beyond. The megalith may have been key, or warning label. The priest may have been guide or watchman. Perhaps the ancients were not seekers of gods, but custodians resisting a floodgate. And if that is true, then the danger was never the temple. It was the threshold beneath it. Next, the pattern leaves ruin and myth entirely, and steps into the modern era, where the disappearances are still happening, where the gate is still open. In the Himalayas stands a mountain that no human being has ever summited. Not because it is too dangerous, not because it is technically impossible, but because every surrounding culture forbids it. Mount Kailash is the holiest peak in Asia, revered by Hindus, Buddhists, Bonpo practitioners, and Jains alike, yet all agree on one astonishing rule. No one must set foot on the summit. Not, should not, must not. This prohibition is older than empire, older than recorded theology. Unlike other sacred peaks, there is no myth of conquest, no hero claiming victory. The summit is not a destination, it is a threshold. Ancient Tibetan texts describe certain pilgrims who were accepted by the mountain, disappearing on the upper slopes and never returning. The Bonpo do not say they died, they say they crossed. Kailash in their worldview is not a symbol of divinity, it is a functioning gate. Even British colonial explorers obsessed with charting and conquering the natural world reported strange vanishings among early survey attempts. After more than one disappearance, a taboo hardened into de facto enforcement. Climbing Kailash became sacrilege, not superstition. This is the only mountain humanity treats not as a challenge to overcome, but as a doorway to leave through. Every year, thousands of pilgrims perform the sacred Kora, a ritual circumambulation of Kailash. Most return changed in spirit, but a small number never return at all. Not from falls, not from hypothermia, not from miscalculation. They simply vanish between one stretch of trail and the next. No clothing left behind, no rope lines broken, no trace. Local authorities do not treat these as search and rescue events. They treat them as summonings, the mountain calling someone home. And so no panic, no scandal, no forensic spotlight appears. The disappearance is treated as completion, not catastrophe. The language is nearly identical to the Andes. Those who vanish are said to have been received, not lost, absorbed. In both places, the landscape is considered an intelligence, not an object. It does not permit crossing at random. It chooses. It selects. This is where folklore and incident reports begin to merge. When multiple cultures separated by oceans describe the same mechanism, vanishing as acceptance, coincidence collapses. What remains is pattern. Western thinking frames disappearance as failure, the body lost, the search unresolved. But in ancient cosmology, vanishing is not disappearance, it is admission. The landscape is not passive terrain but threshold, selective, discerning, and in rare cases responsive. Perhaps travelers do not wander off. Perhaps they phase out. Perhaps shamans were not traveling inward, but across. Perhaps the gate does not open for someone, it opens to someone. This reframing transfers agency. The human does not choose the crossing. The location chooses the human. The portal is not opened mechanically. It is opened relationally. The implication is staggering. People are not being taken from this world. They are being allowed out of it. And if mountains, stones, and ley line nodes are still selecting, then these are not relics of prehistory. These are active systems, still operating. Chapter 7 begins the pivot into the modern world, where disappearances no longer hide in myth or spiritual framing, but in pilgrimage sites with police records. Lourdes is celebrated as a place of miracles, a sanctuary where the ill travel in hope of healing. Pilgrimage trains carry thousands each year to its spring, its grotto, its quiet chambers of prayer. Most come seeking relief from the body, and a few are never seen again. These are not disappearances framed as tragedy. They are reframed, almost euphemistically, as home-going miracles. No police investigations, no forensic tracing, no search parties combing the hills. The vanished are spoken of in reverent tones as though God simply finished their journey early. But the signature is familiar. No witness to a death, no remains, no recovery. In older cultures, vanishings near sacred sites were preserved as metaphysical crossings, taken seriously, studied as thresholds. In Lourdes, the same phenomenon is folded quietly into doctrine and euphemism. Locals will whisper what priests don't record. A handful of pilgrims each generation do not return to their lodgings, do not board the train back home, do not appear again on earth. The miracle is logged as spiritual, not physical, which means the pattern did not end with ancient stone circles or Andean ritual peaks. The rules are unchanged, only the vocabulary has evolved. Varanasi is the holiest city in India, a place where millions come not to be healed, but to complete their lives. Here, death is not an ending, it is a doorway. Cremation ghats burn continuously, feeding the river with flame and prayer. But among the dying are those who never reach the pyre. Some pilgrims vanish before death, disappearing from alleys, courtyards, temple steps, or the riverbank itself. Unlike the endless bodies that pass into the Ganges through ritual, these leave behind no ashes, no ceremony, no trace at all. They simply slip out of the world ahead of schedule. Locals do not treat this as missing persons. They say the city finished them or the crossing found them early. In this worldview, Varanasi is not a holy place one visits. It is a threshold one intersects. The body does not fail. The boundary releases. The Andes call it being called back. Kailash calls it acceptance. Varanasi calls it completion. Different theology, same mechanism. Modernity wraps this in spiritual normalcy, yet the forensic fingerprint is identical to Göbekli Tepe, Stonehenge, and the Gate of the Gods. Not death, not abduction, departure. Ancient cultures admitted openly that some places took people. They did not apologize for the mystery, they prepared for it. But modern religion cannot openly acknowledge disappearance without crisis of doctrine. So the phenomenon is disguised as miracle, mystery, or divine secrecy. Where stone circles once warned the uninitiated, modern sanctuaries veil the same threshold in liturgy. The mechanism has not changed, only the compartmentalization. The sacred site still behaves like a gate. It is society that has reclassified the crossing as the unknowable will of heaven. In other words, the portal did not go dormant. Belief simply rebranded it. This shift is not protective. It is obscuring. It buries the phenomenon beneath reverence instead of inquiry. And so the pattern continues out of sight, hidden not by secrecy but by sanctity. But not all modern vanishings occur inside religious framing. Some happen far from saints, scripture, or prayer. Some occur in places where belief no longer shields the truth. In landscapes worshiped not by ritual but by presence. The next gates are not wrapped in theology. They are wrapped in horizon and sky. Sedona, Mount Shasta, where the earth shows the same behavior, with no myth left to disguise it. Sedona is marketed today as a place of wellness retreats, red rock sunsets, and scenic meditation. But long before tourism, it was feared as a place of crossing. Today, that fear lingers quietly in the background, disguised beneath the word vortex. Here, disappearances do not follow ordinary wilderness logic. Hikers walk only yards ahead of companions round a red sandstone bend and never appear on the other side. No cry, no slip, no broken shale, just a human being removed from continuity. Search dogs behave as they do in Machu Picchu cases. The trail ends abruptly, not lost, not scattered, ended, as if the person walked out of scent, out of world, out of reach. Privately, rangers and sheriff departments have admitted a strange phrasing. They evaporate from the trail. There is no predation pattern, no weather event, no human culprit, only the same forensic vacuum seen at sacred nodes across the world. Western science investigates Sedona for geomagnetic anomalies, measurable charted disturbances in Earth's field geometry. But inquiry stops at phenomenon, never daring to consider intent. The language shifts from spirituality to geophysics, but the outcome is unchanged. Some locations do not merely hold humans, they release them. Mount Shasta is Sedona without ceremony, a threshold with no shrine to hide behind. It is one of the most active vortex regions in North America, and it holds one of the highest disappearance frequencies in the U.S. that cannot be classified as crime, weather, or misadventure. Native stories have always described Shasta as a spirit mountain, a place where one may pass through the skin of the world. The old word is not die, it is cross. Esoteric communities later inherited this belief, calling it an ascension node. Hikers vanish mid-route, sometimes after visible disorientation, as though something unseen pulled their attention off the map of normal space. Authorities file the cases as unsolved, yet quietly admit a disturbing pattern. There is no descent pattern, no injury pattern, and no trail break pattern. It is the same behavior documented at Stonehenge in medieval accounts, but stripped of mythic framing, leaving only the mechanism exposed. If Stonehenge is the sacredly veiled doorway, Shasta is the unmasked version. Same phenomenon, no religion, no ritual, just portal. When Sedona and Mount Shasta are mapped against ancient native sacred centers, Chaco Canyon, Cahokia, the Black Hills, something unmistakable appears. The same global alignment geometry seen in Eurasia and South America repeats across North America. The grid is not cultural, it is planetary. Before tribes, before nations, before temples, the land itself determined where reverence would form. The sacred tradition did not build the site built the tradition. Just as Stonehenge marks a node, Sedona and Shasta are nodes in a living lattice, the American arm of the same earth architecture that threads through Kailash, Machu Picchu, and Göbekli Tepe. This is the moment where coincidence collapses into structure. It isn't culture that selects sacred geography. It is sacred geography that selects culture. Or perhaps more accurately, that selects contact. These places are not destinations of reverence, they are coordinates of access. By now, the pattern no longer hides behind myth or geography. Sacred vanishings in Anatolia, the British Isles, the Andes, the Himalayas, Sedona, Shasta, sites separated by oceans, languages, cultures, and millennia, behave with identical characteristics: high elevation or high resonance, either altitude or intense geomagnetic flux, astronomical alignment. The site is not pointed at worship, but at orientation. Node positioning. The location sits on a convergence point of the planetary grid. No physical aftermath, no remains, no decay trail, no forensic resolution. Narrative reframing. Every culture softens disappearance into transcendence. Accepted, taken by the sky, crossed over, called home, completed, entered the other world. Different civilizations never collaborated, yet told the same story through different theologies. This does not indicate cultural diffusion. It indicates a shared observation. Something happened often enough, consistently enough that myth became record and record became doctrine. This is no longer folklore. This is a phenomenon, a repeated interaction between human presence and geographic intelligence, resulting in removal from observable space without death, violence, or decay. When an event appears in the same form across 3 continents and 4 unconnected civilizations, coincidence is no longer statistical error. It is message. The deeper revelation is this: the temple was never the source of power, the ground beneath it was. Civilization did not build sacredness, it recognized it. Structures were erected not to create a portal, but to frame one, to outline a threshold that already existed in the earth, like building a doorway around a wind that has no shape until bordered by wood and stone. In this view, religion becomes topography. Rites become calibration. Prayer becomes orientation. The individual does not disappear because of belief. Belief merely provides a vocabulary for what is happening. The phenomenon is not spiritual preference, it is locational physics. A portal is not a mythic object, it is a frequency environment. When the human field resonates with the land field, contact occurs. If resonance crosses a threshold, the human no longer remains anchored here. The ancients were not mystics guessing at the sky. They were cartographers of the unseen, observing where the veil lifted and marking those places with stone so the rest of humanity would remember. This is boundary. The sacred site is not the miracle. The coordinate is. Now the question sharpens. Were ancient builders expanding a gateway or sealing one? If these were invitations, then priests were navigators teaching access. If these were barriers, then priests were gatekeepers, protecting the world from crossing without preparation. A shrine may have been an altar or a quarantine line. If temple towards access, then ancient humanity participated. If temple mourn warning, then ancient humanity contained something it feared would take. This is where sacredness may have been misread for centuries. What if worship was not devotion, but caution? What if reverence was restraint? For the first time, the viewer must consider the inverse, that holy ground is not a spiritual offering but a spiritual hazard sign. Here the world is thin, proceed differently. And if the ancients were restraining the threshold rather than using it, then modern disappearance is not sacred invitation. It is leakage, a system still active, unmanaged, still choosing. If the missing are not killed, not abducted, not consumed by accident or predator or time, then the question becomes far heavier. Where did they go? Every worldview before modern materialism held an assumption Western culture later erased, that reality is layered, not singular. The physical world is a chamber, not the building. Human perception is a lens, not the boundary. So what happens when a person steps beyond the lens? Ancient myth calls it the other world. Mysticism calls it the higher plane. Modern physics calls it a parallel domain or dimensional overlap. Different language, same implication, not absence, elsewhere. Perhaps these thresholds are not doorways upward but sideways, into a geography that coexists with ours like two pages in the same book, touching but unseen. Perhaps consciousness is not confined to the body but tethered through frequency. And when the tether releases, transition is not an afterlife, but an adjacent life. If so, the vanished are not taken from here. They have simply resumed where here was never meant to be permanent. Maybe humanity is not the resident species, maybe we are the visitors. The strange silence around these disappearances, the lack of remains, the lack of forensic evidence, may not be a puzzle to solve, but a trailhead pointing toward a truth the ancients already accepted. This world is not closed. What if sacred sites are not shrines to gods, but coordinates of entry? What if the land itself is not symbolic of the divine, but infrastructural to it? Then disappearance becomes neither tragedy nor accident. It becomes admission. Not every visitor is a pilgrim, but every pilgrim is a candidate. The threshold does not respond to belief. It responds to resonance. Those who vanish are not taken out of life. They are moved out of locality. This would explain why the ancients mapped these places with reverence, fear, silence, and precision. It also explains why these locations endure across civilizations that rose and fell without ever erasing the importance of the coordinate beneath. A gate does not need worship to function. It needs geometry. If a place on Earth holds a stable crossing point through its structure, its magnetism, its alignment, then disappearance is not disappearance at all. It is acceptance of passage. And humanity has been mistaking transition for loss for thousands of years. We build fences around these places now. We call them heritage zones, archaeological preserves, pilgrimage centers, national parks. We regulate access, as if bureaucracy can quiet a door carved into the foundation of the earth. But the stones do not close. The mountain does not retire. The node does not deactivate because a border was drawn around it. Sacred sites persist as thresholds not because humans guard them, but because humans were never the custodians of their function. The land does not ask permission to remain active, and it has never stopped choosing. These are not relics of a vanished spiritual age. They are living apertures in a world that still intersects with another. And every lost pilgrim, every vanished hiker, every missing with no trace, every disappearance beside a sanctified coordinate is not a break in nature's order, but proof that the architecture still works. Humanity lives beside the threshold, not above it, and the door has never closed. We keep calling them sacred sites, but maybe they are exits.